Thank you, Ron. That was wonderful. We really appreciate our community, and thank you for coming out. My heavens, this is a beautiful day, and it's not raining, and you're all here. This is great. So on behalf of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, thank you for coming. I've got 3 things that I've been told that I need to do. The very first thing is, who has cell phones? I want you all to take them out and turn them off and put them away. We're going to have a lovely conversation with Justice Sotomayor, and the rules are this: no recording, no flash, no photography, flash or otherwise, no video recording. So just sit back and enjoy this afternoon. And if you can't remember it in your mind, which I don't remember a lot these days, do you see these cameras around? We've got four photographers, and they will put together a videotape that will be on our website in a couple of weeks. So you can all refer back to it in case you forgot, all right? Second thing I need to do is to say thank you. I need to say thank you to Kevin O'Reilly. Where's Kevin? Kevin came at 10:30 this morning and stood in line. And it just shows you that what we do here obviously matters to the Fairbanks community. This does not happen in a vacuum, and if you turn to the back of your program, you can see all of the individuals as well as the organizations that have helped make this happen. So if you know these organizations, you know these individuals, you say thank you to them. The very special people that I personally need to say thank you to are the 4 women I have the privilege of working with in my office, which is Flory Wilcoxon, Felicia Baroud, Katie Kennedy, and Abby Bryce. Without them, this could not have happened. The third thing that I get to do is to introduce our brand new chancellor, who's going to introduce Justice Sotomayor. When Mike Powers was coming to UAF, who just left, yesterday was his last day, he said in his interview, we needed to have an academic to lead this institution. I totally agree with that. And not only do we have an academic that was born at St. Joseph's Hospital, went to the Fairbanks school system, graduated from UAF, went on to graduate school at Oregon State, and then came back to teach in math and statistics, became the department chair, the vice provost, the University of Alaska's vice president for academic and research. Isn't that right, Jim? That's right? Okay, thank you. Then retired, and then luckily, was willing to come back and be our chancellor. So please welcome Chancellor Dana Thomas.
Thank you very much for that. Good afternoon. On behalf of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, I welcome you to the Davis Concert Hall and the Overflow Room for the wonderful opportunity to hear from Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Many people helped organize this event. Retired Superior Court Judge Mary Green made crucial connections for us, absolutely vital connections for us, and we really want to thank Meg for that. And how about Michelle Bartlett? She continues to do an amazing thing. As you know, Michelle led this effort and was supported by a local organizing committee and the justices team. Would those individuals that took part in that effort please stand and be recognized? It's my honor and privilege to introduce Associate Justice Sotomayor. Born and raised in the Bronx, nurtured and protected by her mother and grandmother, she decided early in life to be a lawyer with dreams of becoming a judge. Her collegiate education at Princeton foretold her future success. She graduated summa cum laude and was awarded the highest academic award given to Princeton undergraduates, the Pine Prize. She entered Yale Law School, where she became an editor for the Yale Law Journal. Upon receiving her Juris Doctorate in 1979, she passed the bar and began work as a trial lawyer in the Assistant District Attorney's Office in Manhattan. Quite an experience. As a judge, she served in the U.S. District Court, the Federal Court of Appeals, and in 2009 was named to the Supreme Court by President Barack Obama, making her the first Latina Supreme Court justice in United States history. She's shared her legal expertise with higher education by teaching law as an adjunct professor at New York University and at Columbia Law School. She also served on the Board of Trustees at Princeton. I'm particularly thankful to her today because she met with a group of UAF students and was very generous with her time with them and individually walked from student to student taking questions. Sotomayor's 2013 autobiography, My Beloved World, provides intimate insight into her life experience and philosophy. One insight that many of us can relate to is how she sees her motivation, perseverance, and focus as gifts that are best repaid by serving society. Now I'd like to introduce Robert Hannon of KUAC. He will start the conversation with the Justice. Come on in, Robert. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
You have no idea how overwhelming that is for me. It fills my heart, and it leaves me often sort of feeling speechless almost. Thank you for that warm welcome. And thank you, Chancellor, for the university's invitation of me to come to Alaska. I have been touring for the last 10 days and have enjoyed every minute of it. You live in a quite spectacular state.
So I'm sure you know the format to some degree. I'll start out asking a few questions based on her memoir, which is wonderfully written. And then at some point, she'll get up and she'll wander the audience, and I'll continue to pose questions, but those questions that you submitted through UAF summer sessions. And so I'll try to get as many of the questions that you submitted out before the Justice. So this is applaud yourselves too, because she thought they were great questions.
I told Robert that they're among the most thoughtful questions I've gotten, and I thought he made them up. So, and I thank you for all the time you've spent reviewing the questions and putting this together. Thank you.
Oh, quite an honor. So I think the first one I'll call on is when you were diagnosed as a child with diabetes, your family thought it was a life-threatening situation and you wouldn't last long. Is that right?
That was the belief then, and it was true then. I am 62 years old, and I was diagnosed when I was 7.5. So I've been an insulin-dependent diabetic from the day I was diagnosed till now. I have taken a variety of different shots a day. At the beginning, it was one insulin shot for an entire 24-hour period. Over time, it grew to two, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And for the last 20-odd years, I have been taking multiple insulin shots every day. I take, let's say on average, a minimum of 5 a day, and sometimes as much as 6 or 7, because I take 2 that are what are called basal shots. Those are shots I have to take no matter what I eat. They keep me living. Actually, there's 3 of those, 3 of those. And then I take a shot before every meal. So I've been living with this disease for most of my life, certainly most of my memory. But when I was first diagnosed, the treatment of diabetes was very rudimentary, and the life expectancy was very short. And for those of you who've had an opportunity to read my book, you'll learn that my family was very frightened, as are many families today when they receive news that one of their children may have the condition. It's frightening because it's hard for children to know how to control their own treatment. And so parents have to be very involved in watching their kids and making sure that they're not suffering from either too low sugar incidence or too high sugar incidence. But I had a sense back then, or a certain knowledge, which was true then, not now, that I might not live that long.
You know, the idea of death concentrating the mind wonderfully, in some senses, you really seem to take charge of your own life and be almost the most responsible adult in your immediate family from that moment on. At least that's the impression I get from your memoir.
My mom will tell you that from the day I was diagnosed, I took control. I took control of my treatment. I started giving myself my shots immediately. I tell the story in my book that the first day my father gave it to me and his hand shook so much that I was actually afraid he was going to hit my neck or my face. The next day, my mother, who was a practical nurse, and through the years, I can't tell you the number of people who have told me that she gave great shots, that you never felt them. Well, I watched her face get steely, and she almost had to dig deep within herself and her resolve, and I saw her do this. And it hurt. The third morning, they're in the kitchen arguing with each other over who should give me the next shot. My mom's telling my dad he has to learn because I have to take a shot every day. And him saying, but you're the nurse. And they're going back and forth like this. And I finally just thought to myself, you know something, this can't be. I can't live this way. And I remember having that thought. I don't want to be dependent on them this way. And I want to go stay with my grandmother, whom I loved. And it was the perfect escape from my home. And I knew that if I didn't learn how to give myself my own shots, that I couldn't stay with her, because she would never have the courage to do it. That I knew she loved me too much and it would be too painful for her. So I literally got on a step, and I had watched my mother put a pot of water on the stove to heat it up and sterilize my syringe. And I started duplicating what I had seen her doing. And she finally saw what I was doing and said, and came over and asked, what are you doing? I said, I'm learning how to do this. And she said, do you know how to light the stove? I said, that's the one part. I wasn't tall enough. I saw how she hit it against the flint, but I had not seen what she did above the stove because I wasn't tall enough yet. And so I asked her to show me, and she did. And she warned me about how to do it properly. And we went through the steps, and I looked at her and I said, I got it. And I gave myself the shot, and it was the only one that didn't hurt, thank God. And I've been doing it ever since. But it did teach me self-reliance. But it taught me something I think much, much more important to my condition, which I think has been the motivation for my drive in life, which is I understood then that I had to live every minute of my life as fully as I could. I had to squeeze from every minute that I was going to be given as much as I could. And because of that, I remember the start of my college education where kids were talking about taking gap years, and the idea of that never entered my head because I had to finish my education as fast as I could and get out there and work and make as big a difference as I could in as short a period of time as I had. And that drive I still possess, even though I know now that I can have and will have, God willing, a normal lifespan. I still try to squeeze as much as I can out of every day. And I do love just meeting people, learning new things, having new experiences. I almost zip-lined in icy straits. Almost. I didn't have enough courage
draw
for
a
that.
line somewhere.
I had
Yeah.
to drive. Yeah, that was a little too much for me.
Yeah. You know, another theme early in your book that carries throughout is the rich family life you had. And you mention your grandmother, and you say when you introduce her that every child needs one adult to believe in them unconditionally. And she was that for you, wasn't she?
She was. Didn't matter what I did. If Mom was chasing me around the house, I went straight for my grandmother's skirt because I knew it was the perfect hiding place. She would just not let anybody touch me. And I think every child needs someone like that, who unequivocally, without condition, just simply loves them, and loves them the way they are. You know, for many years, my family would talk about me as if I were, which I was, a terror child. I had a lot of energy when I was a kid, and I was the one who got everybody in trouble. You know, you can read in the book how I led to the break of my cousin's leg, okay? And I was mischievous and got into things, and if anything ever went wrong when we were playing, the first question that came out when adults came into the room was, Sonia, what have you done now? And in fact, when I was an adult, one day we were having a family gathering, and my cousin Miriam, who you'll meet through my book, was chastising her daughter for something she did and said, you're as bad as Sonia was when she was a kid. And I finally had enough. And I looked at her and I said, it couldn't have been so bad. I grew up, didn't I? And I'm not so bad now, right? And she looked and she paused and she said, you're right. Go ahead, keep playing.
Well, I won't go through all the details in your rich development, but what is also remarkable in the sense of your strong drive is you taught yourself to study, and mentors have played an important role in your life. And so I'm wondering if you would reflect on that development that you had intellectually. For example, in Forensic Club, everybody who is going to go into law understands what debate is. You want to get your point across better than the other person. But you say you learned how to listen there.
Well,
what did you mean?
Let me start by saying I never taught myself anything. Other people helped me to learn. And even with studying, when I got to about 5th grade, I realized that I didn't really know how to study because I wasn't getting the grades that some of my other classmates were getting. And so what I did, and this is a memory I didn't have independently, this classmate who had gotten back in touch with me a number of years ago, reminded me of. I went to her, she was the best student in the class, and I said to Donna, how do you study? Because I don't know how. And she said to me that it was such an odd question to have a classmate ask, but she started to have to think about how it was that she studied. And she explained her process to me about reading and underlining things and taking notes and synthesizing what she was learning into manageable bite sizes that she could memorize. And I thought about what she taught me, and I then started to apply it. At the end of that year, I went from a marginal C, sometimes D student, to an A student, and I stayed there. But it wasn't something that I taught myself. She helped me learn it. And that's how I pick mentors and have my entire life. I look for people in every new situation that I'm in that are doing things I either don't know how to do or could learn how to do better. And I look at those people and I volunteer my services to them. I try to work with them as much as I can. I went to college and I found someone who understood my difficulty with writing because I was thinking in Spanish and translating the Spanish into English and writing that way. And because of it, my writing was stilted and grammatically awkward. And this professor pointed it out to me in one of my first papers with him. And when I went back to talk to him and say, explain to me what I'm doing wrong, he took a couple of examples and showed me, and I kept going back to classes with him. He then became my senior advisor. And each paper, he would show me an error I was making and ask me to redo the paper correcting that error. And by the end, I had a pretty good idea of what I was doing wrong, and I was able to improve my writing. And so what do I do now? I write for a living. I would have never imagined that in college, actually. I really would never have. And I guess the best award I've ever received was my book being on the New York Times bestseller list. Because The Kid Who Couldn't Write.
Well, it was well written.
But it was through a mentor. But that's happened to me at every stage of my life. There's been someone who I looked at who I knew could do something in a better way than I could, who could teach me things I needed to learn about what I was involved in. And those were the people that I sought. And I sought their advice, and I sought for them to help me learn. And it really has been what's kept me in good stead. One of the questions I don't know if you're going to ask, but it happened on the Supreme Court. When I got on the court, for 1 year I overlapped with Justice John Paul Stevens, who at the time was 89 years old. And at 90, the year after, he decided to retire. But that 1 year with him taught me so much about being a justice, so much about having enough courage to take cases and think about them on my own, and to decide when I had to speak, because the issue was important enough for me to talk about. And he said to me one day, Sonia, I sometimes list cases on our discussion calendar for certiorari that I know the other justices are never going to grant. It doesn't bother me. I just think it's an issue that's important enough for us to talk about. And that was a very valuable lesson for me as a justice, because there is a pull in a group setting, in a collective, for people to try to agree with each other, and that's not unimportant, But every once in a while, you have to make a statement because it's important to make. And that difference is one that I'm eternally grateful to him for teaching me.
Well, that's a great segue into the audience provided questions, because one person who wrote in wanted to know, what qualities do you believe it's important for a judge or justice to possess?
All right, I am going to get up and walk around you. If you look around, there are men and women in suits. Some of them have uniforms. And you can usually tell who they are because they got these little earpieces in their ear. They're here to protect me from me. Because they don't really like me doing this, okay? But I like doing it because you'll learn from my book that they used to call me a hot pepper when I was a child in ají, and I can't sit still, and I don't like sitting still. So I'm going to walk around among you, but the one thing you can't do is jump up unexpectedly. It scares them, okay? So if you don't do that, they'll let me walk around. If you do it, they may say stop, and I don't really want to stop, okay? So let's have an agreement. Now, who was that gentleman, Kevin, who waited since 10:30? All right. There is a public relations photographer, JR, who I met earlier. Where are you, JR? Oh, no, it's you. Hello. We're going to take a picture of me with him, okay? He deserves that much. All right, where are you again? You're over here. I'll come this way. All right. You guys in front have to look back, but since a lot of you are VIPs, that's not so bad.
And Justice Sotomayor, my nickname was Lazy Bones, so I'll just stay.
All right. But you're welcome to come if you want.
Yeah,
you know?
no, that's all right.
You can shake my hand. And I even give hugs sometimes.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. That's quite a statement. I don't get up that early on Sundays. Hello. How are you? All right. Now, the question was, now I forgot the question.
So I think being personable is one of those qualities that a judge or justice should have, but they wanted to know what else.
That's not always true, by the way. You know, people think of the sort of things that seem natural for the position. Being open-minded, because if you're not, you're going to prejudge things, and that's not what you want as a judge. Having patience is another, and that's a quality that's sometimes very hard to exercise when people are up there repeating themselves a lot. Having a sense of fairness, and that's a difficult quality to describe. Because you see, we don't control the outcomes of our cases. So we're not talking about fairness in terms of reaching decisions that seem fair or just. Because what we define as fair or just as a judge is reaching a decision as the law commands. Because that's what you're asking us to do. You're presenting a set of facts to us and asking us to tell you what the law says about those facts. And the law, especially to the people who lose in cases, and there's always a losing party, okay? The law is not always fair. So when I'm talking about justice and fairness, I'm thinking about just a fairness in how you treat the people in front of you. Are you giving both sides an opportunity equally to be heard? Are you actually spending time thinking about the arguments that each side is making? And sometimes it's very hard if people are making arguments that seem sort of a little off base, a little extreme, to not show some impatience with it. But there is a need to consider the why of why those arguments were being raised. But I think those are sort of natural qualities that I would hope most of you would want in judges. But I think the one that I find the most useful is curiosity. You really have to be interested in the world and everything that happens in it, because those are the problems that people bring to the courts. Every single human interaction that runs into difficulty ends up in a courtroom. And what you're asking judges to do is to decide issues that you have struggled with and thought about and have driven you crazy for a period of time. And experts in the sciences, in medicine, in every human endeavor come to court to ask us to answer their questions. And the only way we can do that is, do we have sufficient curiosity to be constantly learning something new? And learning it enough, becoming expert enough, so we don't do any harm. And that's a big issue to understand, which when we're asked to write our decisions, we can write very broad decisions or we can write narrower decisions. And having the judgment of knowing what a particular situation needs, that's a quality you get by having enough curiosity to understand the consequences of what you're doing. And so for me, on top of all those other qualities, I think curiosity is the most important. I've often said to people, I love being a voyeur, because that's what lawyers and judges are in other people's lives. I get to look at what they're doing. I get to see the very good in them and sometimes the very bad in them, both sides. But then I get to leave and I go to the next case. It's a lot of fun in that.
Well, many people who wrote in wanted to know about being a Supreme Court justice. And you, of course, were on the federal bench and then the appellate court before you got to the Supreme Court. So this person wanted to know, what about the office did you not anticipate?
I've been on 3 courts. They are different in some ways. On the trial court, which is the court most of you see on TV, you know, it's the one where there's one judge in the front of the room, and sometimes there's a jury that the lawyers are talking to. And in trial courts, you're dealing with the issues of the parties right before you. You're trying to resolve their case. And so you're trying to do justice for the people who appear before you. And that's your job as a judge. When you get to the second level, the Court of Appeals, you're one of 3 judges. And there, you're trying to do what's just for the law. Because you can't go to an appeals court and simply say, the judge just got this wrong, all right? Or the judge didn't understand the facts. That doesn't quite work. What an appeals court is deciding, was there a legal error in this trial, in this judgment? And so you're trying to find justice in the law for that case. When you get to the Supreme Court, we are trying to determine what the law is that will apply to all cases. then and in the future. We're doing justice for the law only, and for the future of the law. And what you figure out pretty quickly once I began hearing cases is that the burden of understanding that as hard as I work to get the right answer, or what I think is the right answer under the law, no matter what decision I make, I'm going to hurt someone else. Because the other side had as equal an amount of passion and sense of right as the winning party. And when you take that away from someone, it's a huge burden. So it doesn't matter what kind of case I have, or whether I believe in the rightness of the resolution, because I do. I don't vote unless I think the resolution is right. I am always sensitive to the fact that there's another side that has lost something important to them. So talk about any legal issue that you've seen in the news, and whether you agree with our resolution of it or not, you too, as citizens, should be thinking about both sides, because there are consequences to everything we say that can have negative impacts on others. That, I learned, was the hardest thing. You know, when I was on the District and Court of Appeals, I didn't realize how much comfort I took in knowing that there was a court above me. I could blame them for the mistakes. I can't blame anybody now but me. Oh, maybe my colleagues when I'm dissenting.
Well, someone else wanted to know, early on in your career on the Supreme Court, you made a statement, something to the effect that you felt a bit like an outsider. And I'm sure the dynamics among the 8 now justices is, I always think of it as sort of like a quartet or a chamber ensemble. You must have to learn to work together to achieve any kind of harmony, and sometimes there's dissonance. What's it like there, and do you still feel as an outsider?
Well, the sense of feeling like an outsider was most acute when I first got there. And the reason for that is somewhat self-evident. The justices are together for a very long period of time. Right now, Justice Stevens retired in 2011. We're in 2016. 5 years have passed with the same 9 justices working together. And in that period of time, you get to know each other personally, but you also get to know each other's legal picadillos. You get to understand what moves each justice. What are the questions that are most important to them? What are the arguments that might resonate with changing their minds? I mean, this is, and you were right, Robert, listening is as important as talking in this business. And so you get to work together in a way where you understand each other and what drives each other. Because how you view the rights that the Constitution gives, what you believe the purpose of those rights is, will often guide the outcome of individual cases. And so to be able to convince a colleague who views things differently than you do of the rightness of your position requires that kind of collegiality. But what also happens is, over time, you have to say less, because you sort of know each other so well that at conference, somebody can say one line and we could fill it in. And it happens, okay? Somebody will start to say 2 words and somebody else will mouth, you know. And that does occur, all right? But it's also a history of decision-making that you're living together. And so you don't have to explain things to one another. When I first got there, it felt like, because it was, me walking into an ongoing conversation. And there was so much going on in the background that I had no way of understanding because I hadn't lived it. And it was not infrequent where a colleague would turn to me and say something like, "Sonia, read this case. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but this issue is so important to him, he raises it in every conversation." Whether that was true or not is irrelevant, but the point was made that, I'm sitting there in a panic thinking, I don't remember this in the briefs. What case were they talking about? And it wasn't cited in the brief. It's not anything that I should have known. But that feeling of being an outsider is most acute in that situation. That after almost 7 years, I've just completed my 7th year, I'm going into my 8th. That happens a lot less because we've had those conversations. And many of the issues that come before the court may come to us in new forms, but their basics are still something that we've grappled with. And so that sense of being an outsider is much, much less. What's not is I am a little different than most of my colleagues. I'm not an opera aficionada, despite news reports to the contrary. I like dance, and some of my colleagues have openly said they hate dance. I am a bit more outgoing than a lot of them, a bit more emotional. I dress a little differently. I'm not nearly as conservative. These earrings are tame, but they're Alaskan, and I just bought them today, okay? And they're beautiful. But those differences are harder to quantify, but they exist, and I do at times feel those differences with them. It is hard not to have an exterior that's similar to the people that you're working with or living with. Whether that exterior gets personified in the color of your skin or in the way your voice is accented, those are the most acute ones where you might be able to understand how someone can feel different. But personalities are different. And when you feel that difference, it can feel painful at moments. On the other hand, I think some of my colleagues celebrate it. Justice Scalia one day said, "Sonia, you're like a bulldog. You get a bone in your mouth and you just don't ever stop chewing it." He was talking about my trying to talk him into something. And I looked at him and I said, "Nino, I take that as a compliment." He said, "I thought you should, because I'm a bulldog too." That's what I was thinking. So I think you have to learn how to celebrate your own difference and become comfortable in your own skin to be able to work in an environment that might seem and feel different to you at times. But I think I have found my voice on the court, my niche. And it's something I'm still working on, what kind of justice I will be long term. But I think it is important to understand, because I do value it, that diversity on the court, and I don't mean ethnic or gender diversity, I mean diversity in its widest sense, of people who have practiced law in different areas, people who have had different life experiences of every kind, is valuable. Now, how do I get to that side? I can't climb through, can I? I have to go through the doors? No, that's no fun. Gosh, this is not convenient, is it? I may have to do that. No, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down to the end and I'll find a way. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you for being in the back here. Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. I knew there was an escape somewhere. Where there's a will, there's a way, right? Thank you, guys.
I think your new nickname will be Lewis and Clark.
If I come to Washington, could I talk with you?
Oh,
Really?
it might be hard. It might be hard.
It might be hard.
It might be hard.
I might.
Hello. How are you? Hello. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Hug you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello. Okay.
Okay, well, now you seem to have a real passion to empower young people. As Dana mentioned, you're visiting with local students on several occasions during your short stay. Here at UAF, we have a significant population of Alaska Native students from rural communities. Many may be the first in their family to attend university. What advice would you offer them as a successful member of a minority population?
Yes. Thank you for all you've done. We, you and me, are as valuable as anyone else. And if we can live with that knowledge, if we can understand that we bring to the table perhaps a different, not perhaps, a clearly different life experience, a clearly different set, not of values, because most of the time our values are the same. We value family. We value commitment to community. We value love. Maybe for Alaskans, because they live within nature and they survive within it, their sense of connection to the environment may be a little closer, and certainly closer, than me, who's an urban animal. I grew up in a city. I didn't even know what the sound of a cricket was when I went to college. But to the extent that those of us who know we're different, because we are, can live in these new environments, understanding that we bring valuable pieces of information to the greater society, and that not only can we give as much as we get in terms of knowledge and value, but that we can learn so much from others as well. There is nothing innately wrong with the majority. It is a majority because that's the way life is. They've been here, they grew this community, they've created this world. Learning about it will teach us some things that will be valuable for our native villages or for our native homes. And some things we can look at and say, you guys got it wrong. And that's okay too, because maybe you'll learn that we have done some things wrong. But I think we both have to accept the value in each other. We have to learn that it is a community of exchanging ideas, of exchanging knowledge about the world and how it acts towards different people and in different situations, that gives value not just to us as individuals, but to America as a whole. That is, for me, the beauty of America. Not the melting pot idea, nor the salad bowl idea, nor whatever you want to call it idea. It is the fact that we are able to give so many different people a place they call home, where they can still live the way they feel is most comfortable for themselves. That's the beauty of it. A blessing.
Well, what you just said follows another questioner's quoting you from your book about our collective psyche offering the American people resilience. And it seems like that's an important message given the highly polarized discourse in politics today.
I wish we could learn how to talk more. I think it would be really helpful if we understood what the Supreme Court is forced to understand. We are forced to know that we have to make decisions. There's 9 of us, and for better or for worse, when there's 9 of us, by the way, because of the rules, 5 out of 4 win. Now, there are days I don't like that rule at all. There are days I'm really ecstatic about it, when I'm in the majority, okay? But we understand that if we take our disagreements as personal attacks, that we won't be able to function together as a unit. Every one of us understands that when one of us is upset about a particular ruling, the most vitriolic attacks by one of us on the ideas of another are usually in dissent. But if you're in the majority and can sit back and say to yourself, which we all do, he lost, he's angry. It's a lot easier to forgive someone, isn't it? And that's what we do. We sort of understand when there is a spiting or sarcastic dissent that it's born of someone else's passion about the issue. But it's not directed at us as individuals. And that's not what I think is missing in the American discourse today. There's this assumption that if someone believes in an issue differently than you do, that somehow there's something wrong with them. Something wrong with them morally, or something wrong with their sense of right. I don't actually think that way. I think they're just passionate about something in a different way than I am. And I certainly want to shake them when they're disagreeing with me and get them to see things my way. But I respect the fact that they have a passion that's equal to my own, even if our outcomes will be different. And I think, for me at least, that's what's missing in the discourse today. You sit and watch the news at night, and they have all the talking heads from both sides of the issue. And oftentimes I'm sitting there and I'm watching them talk over each other, and I'm thinking to myself, is anybody listening? And so that's what helps the court become the body it is, and one both that functions. We function best when we're 9, by the way. But it's also what keeps us friendly with one another. You know, the 2 most different people in there voting were Justice Ginsburg and Justice Scalia, and they were best of friends. And that holds true for the many friendships on the court. Justice Thomas and I are 2 worlds apart in our rulings, and yet I admire him greatly for how he treats people and for his sense of decency about people. He's the only justice in the courthouse who actually knows the name of every single employee. And not just their names, but the names of their spouses and their children. I try, but I don't have his facility. And he is someone whom I know just from walking the corridors with him. I will watch him go up to someone and say, how's this? And then I'll have to turn to him and say, what happened? And he'll tell me that person's child was in an accident. This one just lost a mother. I admire that part of him greatly. And so I think we need, as communities, to learn how to talk with one another.
Thank you. This leads into another broad category.
Thank you for being here.
Affirmative action. Several people asked how you view the success of these programs in opening doors to minority students, and do you think they're still necessary?
I love them. Look, I talk about affirmative action in my book. I would have never gotten into Princeton when I was applying if it hadn't been for affirmative action. My high school was not a feeder school. It was a Catholic school in the Bronx. And it wasn't a private school. It wasn't a feeder school to the Ivy Leagues. I got there because my debate coach, a male student, was guided to Princeton by a math teacher at the school. And Ken called me up from Princeton in September of my senior year and said, Sonia, you have to apply to the Ivy Leagues, and you have to apply to them above any other school. And I said to him, Ken, what's an Ivy League? I didn't know. I had only heard of Harvard because of Love Story, which I found out was filmed at Fordham University in the Bronx. Later. My life might be very different if I thought that's where I was going to go, okay? At any rate, Ken is the one who guided me into Princeton, and I learned later that Ken and I were both Princeton's experiment in seeing whether our high school was capable of sending them students who could make it. But the reason he was Asian American, I was Hispanic, the nurse at our school asked me, how did the number 1 and 2 students who were not minorities, why didn't they get into Princeton? And I didn't know how to answer her question. I understood it was an indictment of affirmative action. Today, I could probably turn around and say, because I worked Saturday and Sunday and every summer, and I was a student leader in a variety of different activities, and maybe they thought that I might have a little bit more drive. But that's now, not then. Then I felt the indictment that there was something seriously wrong about looking at students and their promise. Because that's what affirmative action is about. And every person who has a child going to school should hope that that's what schools are doing. Because if you're measuring student and their worth and their potential simply by quantitative numbers, what their LSAT scores or their SAT scores are, what grade they received in school, you're going to do a disjustice to so many individuals, not just minorities. You're going to do a disservice to that kid who's driven about being a musician, or to the athlete child you have who's brilliant and really struggles but keeps their grades up, just maybe not at the highest tier. You're going to do a disservice to those dyslexic kids who are performing really, really well in school, but who can't make that top tier because they're struggling. You're going to do a disservice to those children who show a drive that you know they're going to succeed in life with. So when I was on Princeton's board, I learned that Princeton gets about 1,800 applications a year with perfect A+ grades and 1,800 SAT scores. Princeton does not fill its class with all those students. They take only about 300 of them. And I can assure you that the other 1,000 are not all minorities. Most of them are not. So there's something about accepting that some program, especially in education, has to exist, where you're measuring something more than grades, where you're measuring the quality of the person, as it's been demonstrated in the activities they undertake, in the accomplishments of their life, that will tell you something about their potential for the future. And so that's my definition of it. I know for many people, affirmative action has a negative quality because it seems to be associated with taking people who are not qualified. I see the original affirmative action to be something very different. It wasn't about qualifications, it was about promise.
Well, along that line, someone had another related question and talked about the judicial branch, how they could be more responsive to or representative of the poor and disenfranchised.
I'm sighing because we suffer from the same limitations that the larger society does. You know, you're going through a budget crisis now. It's what I've been listening to on your news for the last week. When I travel, I listen to the local news channel every night because it helps me learn something about your community and the communities I visit. And I know that many of the fears that people are expressing are of budget cuts in programs that they feel are important to the quality of the existence in your state. Among them, I'm sure you're going to have questions about how much do you cut your educational support and where? Okay? So we as the judiciary face the same issues with budget cuts. We've been struggling with that for the last few years. And all of our programs directed towards the poor and the needy, virtually all of them require finances in one form or another. And how we can, with less, reach out to the more marginalized members of society is the constant battle we're having. In the last budget cut, the first freeze went on the payment to criminal defense lawyers. Now, criminal defense lawyers are already paid about a quarter of what regular lawyers are paid to represent people. So they start out already making a sacrifice to do the criminal defense work. And then we suspended their payments until the time that money came in. I was among the people very upset at this because it seemed that if we were going to suspend payments, it shouldn't be to already the people who are receiving the least. But it happened. And thank God that those individuals involved in criminal defense work are committed to doing the right thing for their clients, because none of them walked away from representing their clients to their fullest. But we have the same problems the larger society does. We as a society have to be committed to justice and rendering it in as fair and equal a way as we can. Because if we don't, then we lose the promise of America. Because that is what has helped America be great and respected in the rest of the world. We spend millions of dollars trying to export the principles of our judicial system to the rest of the world. And why is that? Because people are not afraid to do business in the United States because they feel that if something goes wrong, they'll get a fair day in court, whether they're a foreigner or an American. And that sense of our sense of right and justice, if we compromise it, I don't think we can keep anything else. Because if we stop believing that we can live together and not resort to war or to violence to solve our problems, then we're going to have a society that many other parts of the world have and don't like. And so we could always do more. We're going to need some resources to do some of it. But I do think the courts have, and I think it's not just the courts, it's the legal profession. I am a great advocate when I go to law schools to talk to them about their need to inculcate in lawyers that our most important function is to understand that we're citizen lawyers above all else, that we're required to participate in bettering our communities, volunteering our times and talents to improving the quality of life of people who live in our community. And that, yes, we have to earn a living, but we are also obligated to ensuring that we give of our talents to others for no charge. So that means to me, if you're a government lawyer, it's not enough to say that's my public service. If you're a government lawyer, you have to go out there and work on community projects. If you're a parent, you can go on school boards. If you're a religious person, you can work in your community with the homeless. You can do lots of things as a lawyer, but you should always understand that giving is our top priority. That's why I wanted to be a lawyer, because it's service to people. Lawyers, when they're practicing professionally and with integrity, should be trying to improve the human relationships of the people who come before them. People who come to lawyers come with problems. And our job is to try to better their relationship either with the government, with each other, with a neighbor, with a stranger. It's trying to better institutional problems because institutions come to us with their difficulties. We're serving. We're serving to better human interactions. And that's what has always made me a happy lawyer. Yes, that's not a contradiction in terms. Because if you can see the profession that way, if you can work as a lawyer understanding that your job is to better human relations, then you'll be a happy lawyer. But I also think the lesson's important for every person in this room and out of this room. We create our communities. And we can either sit back and let laws happen to us, or we can understand that we have an obligation to make the laws work for us. But that the only way that that can happen is if all of you are actively thinking about whether laws are fair, whether they're really just. How do we change them to make them better? What do we need to do to make this a better community for everyone? And that requires effort. You have to be concerned enough to get out there and do things, and get out there and be a voice for change and for improvement. And so that is the trick to being a member of our society. That's the call that you have to answer. And I don't care what you do, because your voice is just as important in that voting booth as the next one's. So I challenge you to make a better world with me. How's that?
Welcome to Alaska.
Thank you. I've enjoyed every moment of it.
I'm a
Thank
New
you.
Yorker too, and I do.
Hello, you two.
From
How
the
are
South
you?
Bronx also.
Really?
Morris High School right down the
I know Morris really well. Hello. Another Bronxite over here. Hello, you guys. Hi. Come here. Come in here, you two. Come on. You can come too. Come on. Come on. Where's that picture taken? All right. You see him over there? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you're a kid, you get away with a lot with me. Don't worry. Hi. Hello. You got more questions there?
Oh
Al?
boy, do I have more questions.
Go ahead. I told you it might be hard for you to get me to shut up.
Yeah, I didn't expect this. So there are now 3 women on the Supreme Court. Do you think that women's voices are heard equally on the court and in society in general? I didn't hear a sigh on that one.
I just told you I'm a diabetic. I wear this little device next to me, and it's being read by Jen, my medic, and it's telling me my sugars are dropping, because I just took a sugar cube, okay? I'm going to repeat something one of my female colleagues said. Justice Ginsburg was asked this question one day, and she responded in part by saying, you know, there's a lot of moments I say things at conference, and it's like I'm not heard. And somebody will come after me, and they say exactly the same thing. And all of a sudden, it's brilliant. Now, I suspect that if you ask any woman randomly in this room whether that has happened to them, whether it's at home or in their workplace, that everyone would shake their head, yes. How many husbands have had brilliant ideas that they didn't hear their wives express first? How many people in work situations, women, have had that experience? It's legendary among women. There's a lot of reasons for it. With Justice Ginsburg, in part, is she speaks very, very softly. And you really have to lean in to hear her. But that's not an excuse, because you should be leaning in and hearing her. And so if you're not, I think you're being lazy, okay? Often when it comes my turn to speak, and that happens, I'll look up and say, Ruth just said that. And so I try to correct it in the small way I can. But we still live in a society where we express ourselves sometimes differently. I talk to female advocates and I tell them,
Thank you for everything you do.
you have to, it's okay to have a soft voice, but you better go get training on how to make it project. And that doesn't mean having to raise your voice, but it does mean learning how to train your vocal cords to communicate things further. And actors and actresses, you've all heard of stage whispers. They're very powerful. But you have to learn how to do that. Women are not as emphatic sometimes, and believing in what you're saying is very convincing to a lot of people. And so learning how to do that in a way that you're comfortable with, but gets across your passion and your position is very important as a litigator. And so those are things that you can learn how to do better. But there is a difference still, and one that we're still needing to work through and improve upon as a society. Professors in classes have to learn to ensure that women are being picked on equally to the men raising their hands. Those are all learned things on both sides. And so I think there is still a lot of room for improvement in that. And I think we all have to be more sensitive to ensuring that we're treating people of all backgrounds and sexes the same. You know, my cousin Miriam, who's a bilingual education teacher in Connecticut, tells me that one of the hardest things she has to deal with is teaching other teachers that when her kids don't look at them, they're not being disrespectful. In a lot of Latin American cultures, a child is taught never to look at a figure of authority, to always keep their head down, because looking at someone is rebellion or perceived as disrespect. And so she has to teach the other teachers in her school system not to look at these kids who have their heads down and picking them up and saying to them, look at me, look at me. That really puts a lot of fear in those kids, right? Just like in yours. But that's something you have to teach people to understand. Those are cultural differences that are important to learn about, or otherwise we do make people feel not a part of the conversation.
Well, there's a story in your book that when you went into private practice after being a district attorney, they noticed you didn't have any shyness about exerting your opinion or saying what you thought. Was that good practice?
That's really tough. That poor associate went quivering to his room. He told everyone I was a tough bee. I sometimes, you know, and people say that a lot about me. There's a lot of lawyers out there who think I'm really tough. And I'm a pussycat inside. So it's really hard when people say they're scared of me, because I can't understand why. At least myself, I can't understand why. But I do think that I've been blessed with an assertive personality. But I also have to take it into control sometimes and remind myself that I have to be more sensitive to others. You know, one day when I was on the district court for just a little bit of time, a couple of years, something happened with a court transcript. And I called up the supervisor, who I considered a friend, and I was complaining bitterly about what had happened. She came in the next day with a small bouquet of flowers, and I was in a state of shock as to why she was doing that. I wasn't blaming her, I was just angry about what had happened. And my assistant, Teresa, came in to me and said, "You don't understand the position you're in now. When you say something, people now listen." You understand what that means, right? She'd been with me a number of years. And they take it personally. If you're upset by something, don't ever tell them yourself. Tell me, and I'll deal with it. And that was the new thing, the new relationship. She just left me in January after 24 years. She retired on me. But I've learned that she was right. I can't, in my position, give vent to my frustrations. I can do it in the privacy of my office to myself, or even with my assistants who know me and know that it's momentary. But you have to sort of learn about yourself and learn how you impress other people. Because that's the only way that you can interact in the world, is not just viewing it from your own eyes, but trying to see it from other people's eyes.
Well, we had a lot of people write in and ask about the court more broadly and its role in society. And this one questioner observes that the Constitution does not explicitly establish the Supreme Court's authority, but that it grew through its own opinions. That's a neat trick. I want to learn that one. Especially in the home front. But anyway, so do you have any observations on that?
Well, let me explain that question. The Constitution does not say that the judiciary is the final arbiter of the constitutionality of an act of Congress. In many parliamentary systems, in fact, the courts don't have a right to do that. The legislature, or the parliament itself, is the only entity that gets to say whether something's constitutional or not. For Americans, that seems a little strange, that the people who are acting are the people who judge whether they're acting properly or not. But that was the system for most European countries at the time of our revolution. And our Constitution does not say that the judiciary can or cannot declare and be the final voice on the constitutionality of a particular statutory statement or law or an act of the executive. In a case called Marbury versus Madison, our most famous justice.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh, it's so wonderful you're here.
Thank you. Heard a case involving the giving of a commission. Hello, you. You want a picture too? No? Okay. Your mother won't be happy about that later. Decided that question. And he decided it, the Chief Justice, by looking at the structure of our government and analyzing that structure and what he perceived from he was a part of the Founding Fathers Convention, so he knew what they were doing. But he decided that given the nature of the structure of our government, which was 3 equal branches of government, and the structure of the system of law that our Constitution was attempting to establish, that it made the most sense for the courts to be the final arbiter of the constitutionality of the acts of the other 2 branches of government. And so the question here is saying, wait a minute, that wasn't in the Constitution. How did the courts announce that? Well, the way we make almost any decision we make. Most laws are written to solve one particular problem. Something has happened in society where the legislature, your Congress, your state legislature when it's a state issue, has seen a problem, and they write a law that they think will fix that problem. Well, sure, it'll fix that exact set of facts, because those are the ones that are known. But human nature is such that no set of facts is ever going to be exactly duplicated. The next set of facts is going to be slightly different. And so the question becomes for judges, is that difference enough to fall within the purview of the law or not? Is it so different from what Congress intended that the law doesn't cover that problem? Or is it within the purposes of the law to cover that dispute, that set of facts? And that's what judges are doing in every single case, trying to decide what's within the purposes of the law, within its umbrella, and what's not. And that's what Marbury versus Madison was doing. It was saying, what's within the structure of the Constitution? What best serves what was created by the founders in terms of keeping this republic going? And they decided that that was to ensure that there was one body capable of stopping Congress or the executive from overstepping its bounds. And so that's how that decision was rendered. That addresses a broader question, which is, when does the court overstep its powers? A harder question. Because there's some people who believe we have done so in some cases, okay? I'm going to disagree with them, but we are an active society. If the courts go too far ahead of the society and do it in a way that seems wrong to the society is going to resist us. The society is going to lose confidence in our ability to be judges. And so in every decision we render, we understand that if we go too far astray from the values that the society will accept as important, then we will lose our legitimacy. It was a very, very close call in 1954 when Brown versus Board of Education was decided about by the courts. When the courts said separate but equal was not constitutional, a large portion of our society resisted that notion. All of you know the Rockwell painting of that young African-American school child surrounded by marshals being led into her school. That's an iconic print of any. And we could have well lost the legitimacy of our court system in that struggle for equality. But in the end, what I believe is that because the court grounded its decision in the Constitution and its demands under the law for equality, that society would ultimately agree, and it did, because it understood the rightness of the sense of equality. And I think today, virtually everyone, there's always a small exception of people who will disagree, but most of us believe we're a better country because of that call to equality. And so that's how you keep our system in check. We work with each other in trying to ensure that the courts don't go too far and that we keep our balance as a nation. Can I go behind you again? That'll be a little easier, thank you.
Another questioner asks you to reflect on the wisdom and effectiveness of having justices appointed for life.
Tell me, I have a job for life. You think I'm giving it up that easily? Jesting aside. There is very much, I think, a great value in experience. I've always believed that you need a certain life experience to be a judge. With maturity, greater wisdom usually comes. I say usually because, we all know people who get older and not wiser. But for most people, the act of living life and seeing its many variants helps us sort of have greater judgment. And so I do think that the wisdom and the judgment that my more senior colleagues bring to this process is invaluable. I thought it of Justice John Paul Stevens at 89. He had greater wisdom and greater knowledge than anyone else I've ever known. And part of it was that he had lived a very long and fruitful and giving life. You run a risk that some people will stay too long, and that some people won't know when their time to leave has come. But I think that those are issues that have been successfully dealt with in our country. And so I think that the Founding Fathers' views that they wanted judges who did not feel political pressure to decide cases in one way or another because of the security or lack thereof of their job was an important consideration. And I see, even today, the wisdom of that. I see calls for judges to be impeached because they've made unpopular decisions. I see in some elected state court systems the population taking or not renewing the appointments of judges with whom they disagree on one issue or another. I can understand the pull to do that if you're a voter, but I also have to think more largely as a citizen of this community, which is we want judges with different views. We want to understand what the choices are and what they mean. And if we vote out everybody who we disagree with, we won't have as rich a conversation in our country about what justice means. And so I'm pretty much on the fence of thinking, I think the forefathers got it right. It is a job for life for a reason. And it does protect the country from changes that are abrupt in terms of the movement of the law.
Well, the next question sort of follows on about that because several people wanted to know your feelings or reactions to what they perceive as the growing politicization of the court.
Thank you. Oh, sorry about this.
Is that a cue? I should move to the next
No,
question?
no. That's a cue that I have had a cold. I'm not contagious anymore. I wouldn't have been shaking hands. But some of that ending leftover is still here. Hello. Hi. Hello. Thank you. Are we politicized, or is just the country politicized? We hear the cases the country brings to us. We don't make up our cases. They come to us because laws are passed that affect people on issues that are important to them. And those issues, regrettably, often have social implications. But we're forced as a court to answer the questions that we're presented with. But it's not because we created the issue. The society creates the issue. It creates the laws that are being challenged. It creates the situations that are being questioned. And the fact that the court has to rule on them is something that we have very little choice about in the end. So it's not clear to me that the court has become politicized. I think the society has. And the society is involved in more social issues than it's ever been before. You know, for a large part of the country's history, there were very few states with assisted suicide laws. In the turn of the last century, many states started passing those laws. And so a lot of those questions started coming to the court. We certainly didn't have as many drug laws as we do now. I mean, we've really taken on the issue of drugs in a very big way as a society. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it just is. We had very few laws controlling tobacco or alcohol, which most scientists would tell you have the same effects as most of a lot of drugs. But we don't have laws controlling those things in the same ways we've controlled others. We've made judgments in our society about what we think is good or bad in a different way than happened in the past. So I think that's why you see more involvement by the courts. So then finally, why is it that the court...
Mi hija le quiere dar un abrazo.
¿Cómo no? Venga. ¿Cómo te llamas?
Viviana.
Ah, Viviana, mucho gusto. 6 horas para venir a verme. They came 6 hours to come see me. Wow. They deserve the picture too.
La que maneje. La
Sí.
mamá.
The one who drove the car too. Thank you.
Gracias.
And so, why is the court divided? Well, if you start understanding that we get cases and take them when what we call a circuit split has developed. There are 13 circuits throughout the United States. The circuits are divided among the states and the territories of the United States. And so all of the cases of those states under a circuit's jurisdiction come up to that circuit court. And there's 13 of them. The circuits are not equally divided among the states. The Ninth Circuit out in California has 9 states. It's the biggest circuit of today, but when it was formed, it had the least population. That has just turned on its head because of historical developments. But back then, it had 9 states. New York had 3, but New York had the biggest population and the most cases. That's not even true today. We still have a large population, but it's not as big as the Ninth Circuit. And we have probably second number of cases to the Ninth. And I could be wrong about that. But the circuit courts, because cases are perking up from the state courts and from the trial courts in those states, the district courts in those states, the circuits are hearing the same legal issues across the country. And each circuit is coming to their individual decision on whether something's constitutional or not, what a law means or doesn't mean. And eventually, circuit splits start to develop. Different circuits are viewing the same legal issue in different ways. We typically take cases only when circuit splits exist. Because if all the circuits are agreeing, more often than not, they're getting it right, okay? If they're disagreeing, you know that there's a real question about what this law means or whether this law is constitutional or not. So if you assume, the way I do, that circuit courts are made up of reasonable people, at least 3 judges, versus another 3 somewhere else, and these reasonable people have disagreed, why do you think the Supreme Court, who also has reasonable people, have to necessarily agree? And the cases that are coming to us, by their nature, because of that circuit split, don't have clear answers. Because if a clear answer existed, those judges in those other courts would have come to it easily. But they didn't. And so, by definition, what's more amazing is when the Supreme Court agrees. When we're unanimous, that means a lot. And it's not because those courts who disagreed necessarily got it wrong. It means that their judgment, their balance, was different than the one we came to. It frankly is not infrequent where we get a question about what a law means, where we'll sit there and you'll talk around the table and say, you know, it could go either way. Hello, thank you for being here. Thank you. Both sides have good arguments. But you know something? Good arguments or not, we have to give meaning to this law. So we have to decide, ooh, are you okay? Yes. You just got up wrong. I've done that.
She just finished the intensive law program and is invited to the presidential inauguration.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Felicidades. Where we'll look and say, we've just got to come up with an answer, because we have to give a meaning to this law that people can expect and understand. And so it's not that the other side got it wrong, or the dissenters or the other people got it wrong, it's just that a different judgment has been made. And so disagreement, yes. Politicized disagreement, I don't view it that way. I view it as a difference of approach in how we are looking at both how to interpret the Constitution and how to give the best meaning to approaching its interpretation. Hello. How are you?
Well, I know we're running out of time, but finally, several people asked, what would you like your personal and professional legacy to be?
You know, I told you I can't predict my professional legacy because I can't control the cases that have come before me. And I really can't tell you that I will ever have an insight, a judgment, a view that's so extraordinary that it will survive the centuries I hope this country will survive. I don't know that I can pen a Marbury versus Madison. There's not many of those decisions. And so I do hope that I pen opinions that people will read and have a greater insight from, that it will make them think differently about the legal issue in question. On a personal level, I often tell kids who I speak to, I don't know if I can survive centuries, but I can know that I can expand the reach of my life by every life I touch. Every person who hears me talk or reads my book or reads one of my opinions, and it changes them in some way, big or small, then I've perpetuated my life for longer than I will live it. And so that's the legacy I want to leave. That something I do makes a difference in someone's life. And if it does, then I think I've lived a meaningful life. Thank you.
You got quite the workout.
You sure did give it to me. Can I sit down or I go on?
I think you could go now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Well, I know I speak for Michelle Bartlett. Books are, I'm literally talking for Michelle Bartlett. She wants to point out there are books on sale that have been autographed by Justice Sotomayor. So out in the lobby, and I know on behalf of Summer Sessions and the University of Alaska Fairbanks, thanks for your great questions and being here today.